The spontaneous dealings of the residents of Vrindavan relationship with Krishna are called Raganuga. These beings don't have to learn anything about devotional service. They are already perfect in all regulative principles and have achieved the spontaneous loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For example, the cowherd boys who are playing with Krishna do not have to learn by austerities or penances or yogic practice how to play with him. They have passed all tests of regulative principles in their pious previous lives, and as a result, they are now elevated to the position of direct association with Krishna as his dear friends. Their spontaneous attitude is called Raganuga.
Srila Rupa Goswami has defined Raganuga Bhakti as a spontaneous attraction for something while completely absorbed in thoughts of it, with an intense desire of love. Devotional service executed with such feelings of spontaneous love is called Raganuga Bhakti. Devotional service under the heading of Raganuga can be further divided into two categories. One category is called sensual attraction and the other is called relationship.
In this connection, there is a statement by Narad Muni to Yudhishthir in the 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 30 of Srimad Bhagavatam. There Narada says, "My dear king, there are many devotees who first became attracted to the personality of Godhead for purposes of sense gratification, from being envious of him out of fear of him, from contamination, and gradually the worshipper develops spiritual loves. First became attracted to the personality of Godhead for purposes of sense gratification, from being envious of him out of fear of him or from desiring to associate affectionately with him. Ultimately, these attractions become freed from all material contamination, and gradually the worshipper develops spiritual loves and achieves the ultimate goal of life desired by the pure devotee."
The gopis may be considered to be examples of a spontaneous love and sensual attraction. The gopis are young girls and Krishna is a young boy. Superficially, it seems that the gopis are attracted to Krishna on grounds of sex. Similarly, King Kamsa was attracted to Krishna because of fear. Kamsa was always fearful of Krishna because it had been foretold that his sister's son Krishna would kill him. Shishupal was also always envious of Krishna, and the descendants of King Yadu, due to their family relationship with Krishna, were always thinking of him as one of their family members. All of these different kinds of devotees have a spontaneous attraction for Krishna in different categories, and they achieve the same desired goal of life.
The attraction of the gopis for Krishna and the affection of the members of the Yadu dynasty are both accepted as spontaneous or raganuga. The attraction of Kamsa to Krishna in fear and the attraction of Shishupal in envy are not accepted as devotional service. However, because their attitudes are not favorable, devotional service should be executed only in a favorable frame of mind. Therefore, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, such attractions are not considered to be in devotional service. Again, he analyzes the affection of the Yadus. If it is not on the platform of the friendship, then it is spontaneous love. But if it is on the platform of regulative principles, then it is not. And only when affection comes to the platform of spontaneous love, it can counted in the category of pure devotional service.
There may be some difficulty in understanding that both the gopis and Kamsa achieved the same goal. So this point should be clearly understood because the attitudes of Kamsa and Shishupal were different from that of the gopis. Although in all these cases the focus is on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all of the devotees are elevated to the spiritual world, there is still a distinction between these two classes of souls. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the absolute truth is one, and that he is manifested as impersonal Brahma, Paramatma, Supersoul, and Bhagwan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here is a spiritual distinction. Although Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan are the same and one absolute truth, devotees like Kamsa or Shishupal could attain only to the Brahma effulgence. They could not have realization of Paramatma or Bhagwan. That is the distinction.
An analogy can be given with the sun globe of the sunshine. To remain in the sunshine does not mean one has gone to the sun globe. The temperature of the sun globe is different from the temperature of the sunshine. One who has gone through the sunshine in jet planes or in spaceships has not necessarily gone to the sun globe. Although the sunshine and the sun globe are actually one and the same, still there is a distinction. For one is the energy and one is the energetic source. The absolute truth and his bodily effulgence are in the same way simultaneously one and different. Kamsa and Shishupal attained the absolute truth, but they were not allowed to enter in Golok Vrindavan abode. The impersonalists and the enemies of the Lord are, because of attraction to God, allowed attraction to God, allowed to enter his kingdom, but they are not allowed to enter into the Vaikuntha planets or the Golok Vrindavan planet of the Supreme Lord. To enter the kingdom and to enter the king's palace are not the same thing.
So Rupa Goswami is trying here to describe the different achievements of the impersonalist and the personalist. Generally, those who are impersonalist and are inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead get entrance only into the impersonal Brahman when and if they are and if they reach when and if they reach spiritual perfection. The impersonalist philosophers are in one sense like the enemies of the Lord, because the out and out enemies of the Lord and the impersonalists are both allowed to enter into the impersonal effulgence of the Brahma Jyotir. So it is to be understood that they are of similar classification, and actually the impersonalists are the enemies of God because they cannot tolerate the unparalleled opulence of the Lord. They try always to place themselves on the same level with the Lord. That is due to their envious attitude. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has proclaimed the impersonalists to be offenders of the Lord. The Lord is so kind, however, that even though they are his enemies, they are still allowed to enter into the spiritual kingdom and remain in the impersonal Brahmajyotir, the undifferentiated light of the Absolute. Sometimes an impersonalist may gradually elevate himself to the personal conception of the Lord. Bhagavad Gita confirms this. After many, many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me. By such surrender, an impersonalist can be elevated to the Vaikuntha Lok, spiritual planet, where as a surrendered soul he attains bodily features like those of the Lord.
In the Brahman Puran, it is stated those who have achieved liberation from material contamination and those who are demons are killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, become absorbed in the Brahma concept of life and reside in the spiritual sky or Brahma Jyotir. That spiritual sky is far beyond the material sky, and that is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that beyond this material sky there is another eternal sky. The enemies and the impersonalists may be allowed to enter this Brahma effulgence, but the devotees of Krishna are promoted all the way to the spiritual planets because the pure devotees have developed their spontaneous love for the personality of Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are allowed to enter into the spiritual planets to enjoy spiritual bliss in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the 10th canto, 87th chapter, verse 23 of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas personified addresses the Lord in this way. My dear Lord, yogis meditate upon your localized feature and thus they achieve the spiritual perfection of being merged into the impersonal Brahma Jyotir. Persons who treat you as an enemy achieve the same perfection without meditating. The gopis who are embraced by your serpentine hands and who have such lusty attitudes also achieve the same perfection. And as far as we are concerned, being different demigods in charge of the different parts of Vedic knowledge, we are following in the footsteps of the gopis. Thus we hope to attain the same perfection. By the same perfection, we must always remember the example of the sun and the sunshine. Those who are impersonalists can merge into the sunshine like Brahma Jyotir, whereas those who are in love with the Supreme Person enter to the Supreme Abode of the Lord, Golok Vrindavan.
The lusty attitude of the gopis does not refer to any sort of sex indulgence. Srila Rupa Goswami explains that this lusty desire refers to the devotee's particular attitude of association with Krishna. Every devotee in his perfectional stage has a spontaneous attraction to the Lord. This attraction is sometimes called the lusty desire of the devotee. The lust is the devotee's excessive desire to serve the Lord in a particular capacity. Such a desire may seem to be a desire for enjoying the Lord, but actually the endeavor is to serve the Lord in that capacity. For example, a devotee may be desiring to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his cowherd friend. He will want to serve the Lord by assisting him in controlling the cows in the pasturing ground. This may appear to be a desire to enjoy the company of the Lord, but actually it is a spontaneous love, serving him by assisting in managing the transcendental cows.
Sensual attraction. This extreme desire to serve Lord, serve, to serve the Lord is manifest in the transcendental land of Braja. and it is especially manifested in among the gopis. The gopis' love for Krishna is so elevated that for our understanding it is sometimes explained as being lusty desire. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, has explained the distinction between the lusty desire and service attitude in this statement. Lusty desire refers to the desire to gratify one's personal senses, and transcendental desire refers to the desire for serving the senses of the Lord. In the material world, there is no such thing as a lover's wanting to please the senses of his beloved. Actually, in the material world, everyone wants to mainly gratify his own personal senses. The gopis, however, wanted nothing at all but to gratify the senses of the Lord. And there is no instance of this in the material world. Therefore, the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by the scholars as being like the lusty desire of the material world. But actually, this should not be taken as a literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation.
Great devotees up to the standard of Uddhava are very dear friends of the Lord, and they desire to follow in the footsteps of the gopis. So the gopis' love for Krishna is certainly not material lusty desire. Otherwise, how could Uddhava aspire to follow in their footsteps? Another instance is Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. After accepting the sannyas order of life, he was very strict about avoiding association with women. But still, he thought that there is no better method of worshipping Krishna than that conceived by the gopis. Thus, the gopis' method of worshipping the Lord, as if impelled by lusty desire, was praised very highly even by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This very fact means that although the attraction of the gopis for Krishna appears to be lusty, it is not in the least bit material. Unless one is fully situated in the transcendental position, the relationship of the gopis with Krishna is very difficult to understand. But because it appears to be just like ordinary dealings of young boys and girls, it is sometimes misinterpreted to be like the ordinary sex of this material world. Unfortunately, people who cannot understand the transcendental nature of the loving affairs of the gopis and Krishna take it for granted that Krishna's love affairs with the gopis are mundane transactions, and therefore they sometimes indulge in painting lies licentious pictures in some modernistic style. On the other hand, the lusty desire of Kubja is described by learned scholars, as being almost lusty desire. Kubja as was a hunchbacked woman, was also wanted Krishna with a great ecstatic love, but her desire for Krishna was almost mundane, and so her love cannot be compared to the love of gopis. Her loving affection for Krishna is called Kama Praya, or almost like the gopis of love for Krishna.
Chapter 16, Spontaneous Devotion further described. Relationship. In the attitude of the Dionysus of Vrindavan, such as Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, it is to be found the ideal transcendental concept of being the father and the mother of Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. Actually, no one can become the father and mother of Krishna, but as a devotee's position of such transcendental feeling is called love of Krishna in a parental relationship. The Krishna's relatives at Dwarka also felt like that. So spontaneous love of Krishna is in the parental relationship is found both among the denizens of Dwarka who belonged to the dynasty of Vrishni and among the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Spontaneous love of Krishna as exhibited by the Vrishnis and the denizens of Vrindavan is eternally existing in them. In the stage of in the stage of devotional service, where regulative principles are followed, there is no necessity of discussing this love, for it is must develop, for it is must develop of itself at a more advanced stage.
Eligibility for spontaneous devotional service. Persons desiring to follow in the footsteps of such eternal devotees of the Lord, as the Vrishnis and the Vrindavan denizens, are called Raganuga devotees, which means that they are trying to attain to the perfection of those devotees. These Raganuga devotees do not follow the regulative principles of devotional service, very strictly, but by spontaneous nature, they become attracted to some of the eternal devotees, such as Nanda or Yashoda, and they try to follow in their footsteps spontaneously. There is a gradual development of the ambition to become like a particular devotee, and this activity is called Raganuga. We must always remember, however, that such eagerness to follow in the footsteps of the denizens of Raja Vrindavan is not possible unless one is freed from material contamination. In following the regulative principles of devotional service, there is called there is a stage called anartha nivritti, which means the disappearance of all material contamination. Sometimes someone is found imitating such devotional love, but factually he is not freed from anarthas or unwanted habits. It has been seen that a so-called devotee proclaims himself a follower of Nanda, Yashoda, or the gopis, while at the same time his abominable attraction for mundane sex life is visible. Such a manifestation of divine love is mere imitation and has no value. When one is actually spontaneously attracted to the loving principles of the gopis, there will be find there will be found no trace of any mundane contamination in his character.
Therefore, in the beginning, everyone should strictly follow the regulative principles of devotional service according to the injunctions of the scriptures and the spiritual master. Only after the stage of liberation from material contamination can actually aspire to follow in the footsteps of the devotees of Vrindavan. It is said by Srila Rupa Goswami, when one is actually liberated from the material contamination, he can always remember an eternal devotee in Vrindavan in order to love Krishna in the same capacity. And developing such an aptitude, one will always live in Vrindavan, even within his mind. The purport is that if it is possible, one should go and physically be present at Brajabhumi, Vrindavan, and be engaged always in the service of the Lord, following the devotees in Brajadham, the spiritual realm of Braja. It is not possible, however, to be physically present at Vrindavan. One can meditate anywhere on this living in that situation. Wherever he may be, one must always think about the life in Rajadhama and about following in the footsteps of a particular devotee in the service of the Lord.
A devotee who is actually advanced in Krishna consciousness and who is constantly engaged in devotional service should not manifest himself even though he has attained perfection. The idea is that you should always continue to act as a neophyte devotee as long as his material body is there. Activities in devotional service under regulative principles must be followed even by the pure devotee. But when he realizes his actual position in the relationship with the Lord, he can, along with the discharging of regulative service, think within himself of the Lord under the guidance of a particular associate of the Lord and develop his transcendental sentiments and following that associate. In this connection, we should be careful all about the so-called Siddha Pranali. The Siddha Pranali process is followed by a class of men who are not very authorized and who have manufactured their own way of devotional service. They imagine that they have become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. This external behavior is not at all according to the regulative principles. The so-called Siddha Pranali process is followed by the Prakrit Sahitya, a pseudo sect of so-called Vaishnavas. In the opinion of Rupa Goswami, such activities are simply disturbances to the standard way of devotional service.
Srila Rupa Goswami says that learned acharyas recommended that we follow the regulative principles even after the development of spontaneous love for Krishna. According to the regulative principles, there are 9 departmental activities as described above, and one should especially engage himself in the type of devotional service for he has a natural aptitude. For example, one person may have a particular interest in hearing, another may have a particular interest in chanting, and another may have a particular interest in serving in the temple. So these or any of the 6 different types of devotional service, remembering, serving, praying, engaging in some particular service, being in a friendly relationship, or offering everything in one's possession, should be executed in full earnestness. In this way, everyone should act according to his particular taste. Conjugal love. Devotional service following in the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan or the queens at Dwarka is called devotional service in conjugal love. This process is this devotional service in conjugal love can be divided into 2 categories. One is indirect conjugal love and one is indirect conjugal love and another is direct. In both of these categories, one has to follow the particular gopi who is engaged in such a service in Golok Vrindavan. To be directly attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in conjugal love is technically called Keli. This Keli performance means to directly join the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are other devotees who do not wish direct contact with the Supreme Person, but who relish the conjugal love affairs of the Lord with the gopis. Such devotees enjoy simply by hearing of the activities of the Lord with the gopis.
This development of conjugal love can be possible only with those who are already engaged in following the regulative principles of devotional service, specifically in the worship of Radha and Krishna in the temple. Such devotees gradually develop a spontaneous love for the deity, and by hearing of the Lord's exchange of love affairs with the gopis, they gradually become attracted to these pastimes. And after this spontaneous attraction becomes highly developed, the devotee is placed in either of the above mentioned categories. This development of conjugal love for Krishna is not manifested in women only. The material body has nothing to do with spiritual loving affairs. A woman may develop an attitude of becoming a friend of Krishna, and similarly, a man may develop the feature of becoming a gopi in Vrindavan. How a devotee in the form of a man can desire to become a gopi is stated in the Padma Purana as follows. In days gone by, there were many stages in Dandakaranya. Dandakaranya is the name of forest where Lord Ramachandra lived after being banished by his father for 14 years. At that time, there were many advanced sages who were captivated by the beauty of Lord Ramachandra and who desired to become women in order to embrace the Lord. Later on, these sages appeared in Golok Vrindavan when Krishna advented himself there, and they were born as gopis or girlfriends of Krishna. In this way, they attained the perfection of a spiritual life.
The story of the sages of Dandakaranya can be explained as follows. When Lord Ramachandra was residing in Dandakaranya, the sages who were engaged in devotional service there became attracted by this beauty and immediately thought of the gopis in Vrindavan, who enjoyed conjugal loving affection with Krishna. In this instance, it is clear that the sages at Dandakaranya desired conjugal love in the manner of the gopis, although they were well aware of the Supreme Lord as both Krishna and as Lord Ramachandra. They knew that although Ramachandra was an ideal king and could not accept more than one wife, Lord Krishna, being full fleshed personality of Godhead, could fulfill the desire of all in them in Vrindavan. The sages also concluded that the form of Lord Krishna is more attractive than the Lord Ramachandra. So they prayed to become gopis in the future life to be associated with Krishna. Lord Ramachandra remained silent, and his silence shows that he accepted the prayers of the sages. Thus, they were blessed by Lord Ramachandra to have association with Lord Krishna in their future lives. As a result of this benediction, they all took birth as women in the homes of the gopis at Gokula. And as they had desired in the previous lives, they enjoyed the company of Lord Krishna, who was present at the time in Gokula Vrindavan. The perfection of their human form of life was thus achieved by their generating a transcendental sentiment to share conjugal love with Lord Krishna.
Conjugal love is divided into two classifications, namely conjugal love as husband and wife, and conjugal love as a lover and beloved. One who develops conjugal love for Krishna as a wife is promoted to Dwarka, where the devotee becomes the queen of the Lord. One who develops conjugal love for Krishna as a lover is promoted to Golok Vrindavan to associate with the gopis and enjoying loving affairs with Krishna there. We should note carefully, however, that this conjugal love for Krishna, either as a gopi or as queen, is not limited only to women. Even man can develop such sentiments as was evidenced by the sages of Dandakaranya. If someone simply desires to conjugal love but does not follow in the footsteps of the gopis, he is promoted to association with the Lord at Dwarka. In the Mahakurma Purana, it is stated great sages who were the sons of fire gods rigidly followed the regulative principles in their desire to have conjugal love for Krishna. As such, in their next life, they were able to associate with the Lord, the origin of all creation, who is known as Vasudeva Krishna, and all of them got him as their husband.
Parenthood or relationship or friendship. Devotees who are attracted to Krishna as parents or as friends should follow in the footsteps of Nanda Maharaj or Subala respectively. Nand Maharaj is the foster father of Krishna, and out of all the friends of Krishna, Subala is the most intimate in Brajabhumi. In the development of becoming either the father or the friend of the Lord. There are two varieties. One method is that one may try to become the father of the Lord directly, or other is that one may follow Nanda Maharaj and cherish the ideal of being Krishna's father. Out of these two, the attempt to directly become the father of Krishna is not recommended. Such a development can be polluted with Mayavad impersonal philosophy. The Mayavadis or monists think that they themselves are Krishna. And if one thinks that he is himself has become Nand Maharaj, then his parental love will become contaminated with the Mayavad philosophy. The Mayavad philosophical way of thinking is offensive, and no offender can enter into kingdom of God to associate with Krishna.
In the Skanda Purana, there is a story of an old man residing in Hastinapur, capital of the kingdom of Pandus, who desired Krishna as his beloved son. This old man was instructed by Narada to follow in the footsteps of Nanda Maharaj, and thus he achieved success. There is a statement in the Narayan views the prayers that persons who are engaged in thinking of the Lord as their husband, friend, father, or well wisher are always worshipable by everyone. This spontaneous love for Krishna can be developed only by the special mercy of Krishna or his pure devotee. This process of devotional service is sometimes called Pushti Marga. Pushti means nourishing and Marg means path. Such development of sentiment nourishes devotional service to the highest standard. Thus, it is called the path of nourishment or Pushti Marg. The Vallabha Sampradaya, which belongs to the Vishnu Swami sect of Vaishnav religion, worships Krishna in the Pushti Marg. Generally, devotees in Gujarat worship Bala Krishna under this heading of Pushti Marg. Ecstatic love. Okay. So it's 8:30. Do you wish to read more or should we end here?
Mataji, we can read if you want.
Okay. So you can continue.
Chapter 17, Aesthetic Love. By the process of executing regulative devotional service, one is actually elevated to the transcendental stage beyond the material modes of nature. At that time, one's heart becomes illuminated like a sun. The sun is far above the planetary systems, and there is no possibility of its being covered by any kind of cloud. Similarly, when a devotee is purified like the sun from his pure heart, there is a diffusion of aesthetic love which is more glorious than the sunshine. Only at that only at that time of attachment to Krishna, only at that time is the attachment to Krishna perfect. Spontaneously, the devotee becomes eager to serve the Lord in his aesthetic love. At this stage, the devotee is on the platform of Uttam Adhikari, perfect devotion. Such a devotee has no agitation from material affection and is interested only in the service of Radha and Krishna. To clarify in the previous chapters, the symptoms of devotional service were explained along the instructions as how we may execute devotional service with our present senses and gradually rise to the platform of ecstasy in spontaneous love. And the two kinds of devotional service, namely devotional service through regulative principles and through spontaneous love, were discussed. Within the stage of the regulative principles of devotional service, there are two divisions, namely executive and effective. This effective portion of devotional service is called bhava or ecstasy. In this connection, there is a statement in the tantras that ecstasy is the first symptom of pure love for the personality of Godhead, and in that stage, one is sometimes fond of shedding tears or shivering. Not always are these symptoms manifest, but occasional. When King Ambarisha was put into difficulty by Durvasa, he began to think of the lotus feet of the Lord, were and thus there were some changes in the body, and tears were falling down from his eyes. These symptoms are the activities of ecstasy. They are visible in the shivering of the body and the shedding of tears. After the outward appearance of these aesthetic symptoms, they stay within the mind, and continuation of the ecstasy is called samadhi. This stage of appreciation becomes the cause cause of future exchanges of loving affairs with Krishna.
Elevation to this stage of ecstasy can be possible in two ways. One way is by constant association with pure devotees. The other way is by the special mercy of Krishna or by the mercy of pure devotee of Krishna. Elevation to the ecstatic stage of life is generally attained through association with pure devotees, while elevation to that stage by the special mercy of Krishna or his devotee is very rare. The purport is that one should execute devotional service rigidly in the association of devotees so that there will be in raising certainty in raising oneself to that ecstatic position. In special cases, of course, there is a special favor from Krishna, and although we should always expect that, we should not sit idly and simply wait for Krishna's special mercy. The regular duties must be performed. It is just as when sometimes it is found that a person who never attended school or college may be recognized as a great scholar or an honorary degree from great authorities may be offered to him. But this does not mean that one should avoid school and expect to automatically receive an honorary degree from some university. Similarly, one should devotedly execute the regulative principles of devotional service and at the same time hope for Krishna's favor or his devotee's favor. An example of rising to the stage of ecstatic love by executing the regulative principles of devotional service is given in the life story of Narad, which is described to Vyasadeva in Srimad Bhagavatam. Narad Muni tells there of his previous life and how he developed to the stage of ecstatic love. He was engaged in the service of great devotees and used to hear their talks and songs. Because he had the opportunity to hear these pastimes and songs of Krishna from the mouths of pure devotees, he became very attracted within his heart. Because he had become so eager to hear these topics, he gradually developed within himself an ecstatic love for Krishna. This ecstatic love is prior to the pure love of Krishna, because in the next verse, Narad confirms that by gradual process of hearing from the great sages, he developed love of Godhead. In that connection, Narad Muni continues to say in first canto, 5th chapter, verse 28 of Bhagavatam, first I passed my days in the association of great sages during the rainy autumn season. Every morning and evening I heard them while they were singing and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and thus my heart gradually became purified. As soon as I heard them with great attention, the influence of the modes of material ignorance and passion disappeared, and I became firmly fixed in devotional service to the Lord.
These are the practical examples how one can develop the stage of aesthetic love simply by association of pure devotees. It is essential, therefore, one can constantly associate with pure devotees who are engaged in morning and evening in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. In this way, one will get the chance to purify his heart and develop his aesthetic pure love for Krishna. This statement is also confirmed in the third canto, 25th chapter, verse 25 of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Kapil says, my dear mother, when a person is actually in association with pure devotees, the sublime potency of my devotional service can be experienced. In other words, when a pure devotee speaks, his words act upon the hearts of the audience. What is the secret of hearing and chanting? A professional speaker cannot impress transcendental ecstasy within the hearts of the listeners. However, when a realized soul who is engaged in the service of the Lord is speaking, he has the potency to inject spiritual life within the audience. One should therefore seek the association of such a pure devotee, such unalloyed devotees, and by such association and service, a neophyte devotee will certainly develop attachment, love, and devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
In the Badhu Purana, there is a story of a neophyte devotee who, in order to raise herself to the ecstatic platform, danced all night to invoke the Lord's grace upon her. Sometimes, however, it is found that without undergoing any devotional process, one all of a sudden develops a devotion for Lord Krishna. This sudden development of devotional attitude in a person must be understood as a special mercy of Krishna or his devotee. This apparently accidental development of ecstatic feelings through the causeless mercy of Krishna can be divided into three groups: simply by speaking, simply by glancing, and simply by a good wishing. In the Naradiya Puran, there is a statement about development of ecstatic love simply by speaking. Lord Krishna said to Narada, O best of the Brahmins, I wish that you may develop unalloyed devotional service unto me. which is full of transcendental bliss and all auspiciousness. In the Skanda Purana, there is a statement about developing ecstatic love towards Krishna simply by glancing. It is stated there when the inhabitants of Jangal province saw the personality of Godhead Krishna, they were so stricken with feeling that they could not withdraw their glance from him. As far as heartfelt wishes are concerned, there is a statement in the Shuk Samhita, where Narad tells Srila Vyasadeva, "You have a son who is the greatest devotee of the personality of Godhead, and I can observe that that without any following of the regulative principles of devotional service, he is already enriched with many symptoms of many of the symptoms achieved by the execution of devotional service after many births."
As for aesthetic love of Krishna, there is a statement in 7th canto, 4th chapter, verse 36 of Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Narad Muni addresses King Yudhishthir. My dear king, it is very difficult to describe the character of Prahlad. He developed a natural attraction for Krishna, and whatever I can explain about his character will simply be an arrangement of his words. His actual character is impossible to describe. This means that Narad himself admitted that the natural development of Prahlad's aesthetic love was the grace of Lord Krishna. This natural attraction for Krishna on the part of Prahlad was developed simply by the mercy of Narad Muni. When Prahlad Maharaj was within the womb of his mother, he was being sympathetically instructed by Narad Muni about the science of the devotional service. And at the same time, Narad Muni was wishing that the child within the womb could also take advantage of these instructions, because Narad Muni, an authorized devotee and great associate of the personality of Godhead, was desiring auspiciousness for Prahlad Maharaj. He developed all the characteristics of high grade devotee. This is called natural affection. It is caused by the special grace of the personality of Godhead, or by the special grace of great devotee like Narad.
There is a statement in the Skanda Purana wherein Parvat Muni tells Narad, "My dear Narad, of all saintly persons, you are so great and glorious that simply by your good wishes, a low-born hunter also became a great elevated devotee of Lord Krishna." This ecstatic love for Krishna can be divided into five divisions, which will be described by Rupa Goswami later on. Should I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Chapter 18, Character of One in Ecstatic Love. Rupa Goswami next describes the characteristics of a person who has actually developed his ecstatic love for Krishna. The characteristics are as follows. He is always anxious to utilize his time in the devotional service of the Lord. He does not like to be idle. He wants service always, 24 hours a day without deviation. He is always reserved and perseverant. He is always detached from all material attraction. He does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. He is always certain that Krishna will bestow his mercy upon him. He is always very eager to serve the Lord faithfully. He must be very attached to the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. He is always eager to describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. He is very pleased to live in a place where the Lord's pastimes are performed, example Mathura, Vrindavan, or Dwarka.
Utilization of time. An unalloyed devotee who has developed aesthetic love for Krishna in, is always engaging his words in reciting prayers to the Lord. Within the mind, he is always thinking of Krishna, and with his body, he either offers obeisances by bowing down before the deity or engages in some other service. During these aesthetic activities, he sometimes shed tears. In this way, his whole life is engaged in the service of the Lord, with not with not a moment wasted on any other engagement. Perseverance. When a person is undisturbed, even in the presence of various causes of disturbance, he is called reserved and preservant. An example of this perseverance and reservation is found in that the behavior of King Parikshit. As described in the first canto, 19th chapter, verse 15 of Srimad Bhagavatam, the king says that there to all the sages present before him at the time of his death. My dear Brahmanas, you should always accept me as your surrendered servant. I have come to the bank of the Ganges to devote my heart and soul unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So please bless me that Mother Ganges may also be pleased with me. Let the curse of the Brahmana's son fall upon me. I do not mind. I only request that at the last moment of my life, all of you will kindly chant the holy name of Lord Vishnu so that I may realize his transcendental qualities. This example of Maharaj Parikshit's behavior, his remaining patient even at the last point of his life, is undisturbed condition of mind. It is an example of reservation. This is one of the characteristics of a devotee who has developed aesthetic love for Krishna.
Detachment. The senses are always desiring sense enjoyment. When a devotee develops transcendental love for Krishna, his senses are no longer attracted by material desires. This state of mind is called detachment. There is a nice example of this detachment in connection with the character of King Bharat. In 5th canto, 14th chapter, verse 43 of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated, Emperor Bharat was so attracted by the beauty of the lotus feet of Krishna that even in his youthful life, he gave up all kinds of to family, children, friends, kingdom, etc., as though they were untouchable tools. Emperor Bharat provides a typical example of detachment. He had everything enjoyable in the material world, but he left it. This means that detachment does not mean artificially keeping oneself aloof and apart from allurements of attachment. Even in the presence of such allurements, if one can remain unattracted by material attachment, he is called detached. In the beginning, of course, a neophyte devotee must try to keep himself apart from all kinds of alluring attachment, but the real position of a mature devotee is that even in the presence of all allurements, he is not at all attracted. This is the actual criteria of detachment.
Pridelessness. When a devotee, in spite of possessing all the qualities of pure realization, is not proud of his possession, he is called prideless. In Padma Puran, it is stated that the king Bhagirath, Bhagiratha was an emperor above all other kings, yet he developed such aesthetic love for Krishna that he became a mendicant and went out begging even to the homes of his political enemies and untouchables. He was so humble that he respectfully bowed down before them. There are many similar instances in the history of India. Even very recently, about 200 years ago or less, one big landlord known as Lal Babu, a Calcutta landholder, became a Vaishnava and lived in Vrindavan. He was also begging from door to door, even at the homes of his political enemies. Begging involves being ready to be insulted by persons to whose whom one has come. That is natural. But if one has to, one has to tolerate such insults for the sake of Krishna. The devotee of Krishna can accept any position in the service of Krishna.
Great hope, the strong conviction that one will certainly receive the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called in Sanskrit Asha Bandh. Asha Bandh means to continue to think. Because I am trying my best to follow the routine principles of devotional service, I am sure that I will go back to Godhead back home. In this connection, one prayer of by Rupa Goswami is sufficient to exemplify this hopefulness. He says, I have no love for Krishna nor for the causes of developing love for Krishna, namely hearing and chanting. And the process of bhakti yoga, by which one is always thinking of Krishna and fixing his lotus feet in the heart, is also lacking in me. As far as philosophical knowledge or pious works are concerned, I don't see any opportunity for me to execute such activities. But above all, I am not even born of a nice family. Therefore, I must simply pray to you, Gopi Jana Vallabh, Krishna, maintainer and beloved of the gopis. I simply wish and hope that some way or other I may be able to approach your lotus feet, and this hope is giving me pain because I think myself quite incompetent to approach that transcendental goal of life. The purport is that under this heading of Asha Bandhu, one should continue to hope against hope that some way or other he will be able to approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord.
Eagerness for achieving the desired success. When one is sufficiently eager to achieve the devotional service, that eagerness is called samut samutkantha. This means complete eagerness. Actually, this eagerness is a is the price for achieving the success in Krishna consciousness. Everything has some value, and one has to pay the value before obtaining or possessing it. It is stated in the Vedic literature that to purchase the most valuable thing, Krishna consciousness, one has to develop intense eagerness for achieving success. This intense eagerness is very nicely impressed by Bilva Mangal Thakur in his book Krishna Karnamritam. He says, I am eagerly waiting to see that boy of Vrindavan whose bodily beauty is captivating the whole universe, whose eyes are always bounded by black eyebrows and expand like lotus petals, and who is always eagerly glancing over his devotees and therefore moving slightly here and there. His eyes are always moist, uh, his lips are colored like copper, and through those lips there come a sound vibration which drives one madder than mad elephant. I want to so I want so much to see him at Vrindavan.
Attachment to chanting the holy names of the Lord. In the same Krishna Karnamrit, there is another statement about chanting of Radharani. It is said by one of the associates of Radharani, O Lord Govinda, that girl who is the daughter of King Vrishabhanu is now shedding tears and she is anxiously chanting your holy name, Krishna, Krishna. Eagerness to describe the Lord's transcendental qualities. Attachment for chanting the glories of the Lord is also expressed in Krishna Karnamrit as follows. What shall I do for Krishna, who is pleasing beyond all pleasurable conceptions, and who is naughtier than all restless boys? The idea of Krishna's beautiful activities is attracting my heart, and I do not know what I can do.
Attraction for living in a place where Krishna has his pastimes. In the book Padyavali by Sri Rupa Goswami, there is the following statement about Vrindavan. In this place, the son of Nanda Maharaj used to live with his father, who was king of all cowherd men. In this place, Lord Krishna broke the cart in which the Shaktasur demon was concealed. At this place, Damodar, who can cut the knot of our material existence, was tied up by his mother Yashoda. A pure devotee of Lord Krishna resides in the district of Mathura and Vrindavan and visits all the places where Krishna's pastimes were performed. At all the at these sacred places, Krishna displayed his childhood activities with the cowherd boys and the Mother Yashoda. The system of circumambulating all these places is still current among devotees of Lord Krishna, and those coming to Mathura and Vrindavan always feel transcendental pleasure. Actually, if someone goes to Vrindavan, he will immediately feel separation from Krishna, who performed such nice activities when he was present there. Such attraction for remembering Krishna's activities is known as attachment for Krishna. There are impersonalist philosophers and mystics, however, who by show of devotional service want ultimately to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord. They sometimes try to imitate a pure devotee's sentiment for visiting the holy places where Krishna had his pastimes, but they simply have a view of salvation, so their activities cannot be considered attachment.
It is said by Rupa Goswami that attachment exhibited by pure devotees for Krishna cannot possibly perfected in the hearts of fruitive workers or mental speculators, because such attachment in Krishna consciousness is very rare and possible to achieve even for many liberated persons. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, liberation from material contamination is the stage at which devotional service can be achieved. For a person who simply wants to have liberation and to merge into the impersonal Brahma Jyotir, attachment to Krishna is not possible to acquire. This attachment is very confidentially kept by Krishna and is bestowed only upon pure devotees. Even ordinary devotees cannot have such pure attachment for Krishna. Therefore, how is it possible for success to be achieved by persons whose heart are contaminated by actions and reactions of fruitive activities and who are entangled by various types of mental speculation? There are so many so-called devotees who artificially think of Krishna's pastimes known as Ashtakaliya Kaliya Leela. Ashtakaliya Leela. Sometimes one may artificially imitate these, pretending that Krishna is taking with him in the form of is talking with him in the form of a boy. Or else one may pretend that Radharani and Krishna both have come to him and are talking with him. Such characteristics are sometimes exhibited by the impersonalist class of men, and they may captivate some innocent persons who have no knowledge in the science of devotional service. However, as soon as an experienced devotee sees all of these caricatures, he can immediately evaluate such rascaldom. If such a pretender is sometimes seen possessing imitative attachment to Krishna, that will not be accepted as real attachment. It may be said, however, that such attachment gives the pretender hope that he may eventually rise onto the actual platform of pure devotional service.
This imitative attachment can be divided into two headings, namely shadow attachment and para, transcendental attachment. If someone, without undergoing the regulative principles of devotional service or without being guided by a bona fide spiritual master, shows such imitative attachment, this is called shadow attachment. Sometimes it is found that a person actually attached to material enjoyment or salvation has the good fortune to associate with pure devotees while they are engaged in chanting of the holy name of the Lord. By the good grace of the Lord, one may also cooperate and join the chanting. At that time, simply by association of such pure devotees, the moonlight rays from their hearts reflect on him, and by the influence of the pure devotees, he may show some likeness of attachment caused by insecutiveness, but this is very flickering. And if by the manifestation of such shadow attachment one feels the disappearance of all material pangs, then it is called para attachment. Such shadow attachment of or para attachment can develop if one associates with pure devotee or visits holy places like Mathura and Vrindavan. And if ordinary man develops such attachment for Krishna and fortunately performs devotional service in the association of pure devotees, he can also rise to the platform of pure devotional service. The conclusion is that the transcendental attachment is so powerful that if such attachment is seen manifested even in some common man, by the association of a pure devotee, it can bring one to the perfectional stage. But such attachment for Krishna cannot be invoked in a person without being successfully blessed by the association of pure devotees.
As attachment can be invoked by the association of pure devotees, so attachment can also be extinguished by offenses committed at the lotus feet of pure devotees. To be more clear, by association of pure devotees, attachment for Krishna can be aroused. But if one commits offenses at the lotus feet of a devotee, one's shadow attachment or para attachment can be extinguished. This extinguishing is like the waning of the full moon, which gradually decreases and at last becomes dark. One should therefore be very careful while associating with the pure devotees to guard against committing an offense at their lotus feet. Transcendental attachment, either shadow or para, can be nullified by different degrees of offenses at the lotus feet of pure devotees. If the offense is very serious, then one's attachment becomes almost nil. And if the offense is not very serious, one's attachment can become second class or third class.
If someone becomes attached to the principles of salvation or to merging into existence of the Brahma Jyotir, his ecstasies gradually diminish into shadow or para attachment or else transform into the principles of ahangaro, ahangropasana. This ahangroho pasana describes living entity when he begins spiritual realization by identifying himself with the Supreme Lord. This state of self-realization is technically known as monism. The monist thinks himself one with the Supreme Lord. Thus, he does not differentiate between himself and the Supreme Lord. It is his view that by worshipping himself, he is worshipping the Supreme Whole. Sometimes it is found that a neophyte is taking part in the chanting and dancing very enthusiastically, but within himself, he is under the impression that he has become one with the Supreme Whole. This conception of monism is completely different from the pure transcendental devotional service. If, however, it is seen that a person has developed a higher standard of devotion without having undergone even the regulative principles, it is to be understood that he that his status of devotional service was achieved in a former life. For some reason or another, it had been temporarily stopped, most probably by an offense committed at the lotus feet of a devotee. Now, with a good second chance, it has again begun develop. The conclusion is that the steady progress in devotional service can be attained only in the association of pure devotees.
If one, if one can gradually advance his status in devotional service, this is understood to be due to the causeless mercy of Krishna himself. If a person is completely detached from material enjoyment and has developed pure ecstatic devotion, even if he sometimes accidentally found not living up to the standard of devotional service, we should not be envious of him. It is confirmed also in the Bhagavad Gita that a devotee who has unflinching faith in in devotion to the Lord, even if sometimes found to be accidentally deviated from the pure devotional characteristics, should be should still be counted among the pure. Unflinching faith and devotional service in Lord Krishna and in the spiritual master makes one highly elevated in the activities of devotional service. In the Narasimha Puran, it is stated, if a person has completely engaged his mind, body, and activities in the service of the Supreme Godhead, but externally he is found to be engaged in some abominable activities. These abominable activities will surely be very quickly vanquished by the influence of staunch devotional force. The example is given that on the full moon there are some spots that may appear to be potch marks. Still, the illumination spread by the full moon cannot be checked. Similarly, a little fault in the midst of volumes of devotional service is not at all to be counted as a fault. Attachment for Krishna is transcendental bliss. Amid unlimited volumes of transcendental bliss, a spot some material defect cannot act in any way. आज की जो भागवतम क्लास थी इसके ससानी प्रभु जी कि उन्होंने भी यही पॉइंट हाईलाइट किया था कि बहुत सारे योगीज में से कोई एक डिवोटी बनता है और वो डिवोटी हमारे बीच अगर है तो हमें उसकी वैल्यू करनी चाहिए. हो सकता है कि वो अप टू द मार्क एक्ट नहीं कर रहा है या बहुत सारी इम्प्योरिटीज है, लेकिन फिर भी हमें उसकी वैल्यू करनी चाहिए. जिस तरह से जब कर्दम मुनि और देवहूति माता थी, तो जब कर्दम मुनि वो बहुत ही बड़े योगी थे. अगर हम भागवतम पढ़ेंगे, उनकी स्टोरी सुनेंगे, तो कर्दम मुनि ने पहले वो योगी थे, फिर उनका विवाह करवाया श्री कृष्ण ने देवहूति से, और फिर उसके बाद वो फिर से विवाह के बाद वापस वो ध्यान में चले गए. फिर उनका जब इतनी इंटेंसिटी के साथ, इतने प्योरिटी के साथ देवहूति माता उनकी सर्विस करती थी, तो इसलिए उन्होंने रेसिप्रोकेट किया. उन्होंने बहुत ज़्यादा मटेरियली उनके साथ रेसिप्रोकेट किया. उन्होंने एक पूरा एरोप्लेन बनाया था 7 मंजिल का, और भी बहुत सारी चीज़ें उन्होंने बनाई थी. तो उन्होंने मटेरियली उनके साथ फिर रेसिप्रोकेट किया, और फिर उसके बाद वापस से वो अपने ध्यान मुद्रा में चले गए थे. तो देवहूति माता जब श्री कपिल देव, जो कि स्वयं भगवान के ही अवतार हैं, उनसे जब बात करती है, जब कपिल देव देवहूति माता को इंस्ट्रक्शंस देते हैं, तो वो बताती है कि जब कर्दम मुनि उनके साथ थे, तो वो उन्हें सिर्फ एज अ हस्बैंड कि वो उन्होंने कितने अच्छे से रेसिप्रोकेट किया, उस वे में रिस्पेक्ट करती थी. बट कभी उन्होंने ये नहीं सोचा कि वो कितने बड़े साधु थे. वो इतने बड़े साधु थे कि स्वयं भगवान श्री कृष्ण ने उनको कहा था कि आप विवाह कीजिए. और तो मतलब जब डिवोटीज हमारे बीच रहते हैं, तब हम उनकी रिस्पेक्ट नहीं करते या हम उनकी वैल्यू नहीं करते, बट जब वो चले जाते हैं, फिर हम उनकी रिस्पेक्ट करना शुरू करते हैं. तो इसलिए हमें बहुत ज़्यादा संभल के रहना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि चैतन्य महाप्रभु, ऑल्दो ही इज वेरी मर्सीफुल, बट ही डोंट लाइक दोज डिवोटीज हु कमिट ऑफेंसेस. इवन जगाई मधाई को चैतन्य महाप्रभु ने इसलिए माफ कर दिया था एक बार में, क्योंकि उन्होंने कोई वैष्णव अपराध नहीं किया था. इस वजह से वो माफ कर दिए गए थे. लेकिन हम तो इतने इतने ज्यादा अपराध करते हैं, और ये सब चलता रहा तो फिर बहुत गड़बड़ हो जाएगी. So we should pray to pure devotees of the Lord to protect us. Okay, let's end the session. Pancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhye vaja patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you so much for joining regularly. I'm very glad because my target is to complete Nectar of Devotion as soon as possible, and you are helping me with this. After this, we'll start with Bhagavad Gita. पिछली बार हमने सिर्फ वर्सेस पढ़े थे, वर्सेस ट्रांसलेशन, और इस बार पूरा पॉइंट के साथ पढ़ेंगे, जितना कंप्लीट हो जाए जल्द से जल्द. सेम बिकॉज ऑफ यू आई एम ऑल्सो रीडिंग डेली. हम एक काम कर सकते हैं, मैं 7 बजे आरती करती हूँ, तो 7:15 से हम सेशन रख सकते हैं ताकि हम ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा चैप्टर रीड कर पाए. 7:15 to 8:15 रख लेंगे. 1 घंटे में ऑलमोस्ट 4 चैप्टर्स तो हो ही जाएंगे रोज. तो नेक्टर ऑफ डिवोशन हो जाएगा. फेब्रुअरी मार्च चल रहा है 10 या